Let's make the June flower, the rose. Hi, and welcome back to my craft room. My name is Kelsey. I also call myself Dinosaur Mama, and today we are in the 6th month of the year, and we are making the 7th flower of the year. I made 2 flowers for May because they had the hawthorn and the lily of the valley, and this month there are 2 flowers, but I'm only going to be making 1, and that is the rose. If you are new to my craft room, welcome. I am so happy that you are here crafting with me. If you are looking for where to download the free SVG file, you can find that linked below to my blog where I have over 850 SVG files. You can also find linked below all of the previous flowers of the month for this year and all of the materials and tools that you will need. If you are not new to my craft room, thank you for coming back. I have been a little bit absent. I was in the ER and then my son got sick, and so I have taken some time, and I have to admit, crafting and doing content full time over the summer with my son not being in any camp or school is very difficult, as well as staying on top of all of my other stuff. I just am kind of falling behind, if I'm gonna be honest. So I'm here, I'm going to do my best to try to get out a few more videos until summer is over, and my son starts school pretty early, so I should be in full force starting in August. So I am very sorry that I have been delayed on all of my stuff. That is not like me, I don't like it, and I want to be crafting with you. It's just I've had a lot going on this month, and not all of it great, but I'm still here and showing up because I love to craft and I love teaching people to craft, and this community is just, it means so much to me. So thank you for crafting with me. With all of that being said, and it's probably just nonsense, but let's get started on making our paper roses. So this file is pretty easy to work with. It has 6 petals, 3 sets of 2. So you're going to start with the smallest as your inside and work your way out to the biggest on the outside. And I gave you 3 leaves as well as a calyx. For mine, I personally duplicated just the 3 leaves, so you just duplicate those. But you can do whatever you want with the leaves, obviously. It depends on what you're using your rose for. I am doing a stemmed flower today. Make sure if you do any size changes that you are resizing the whole file and not just one piece. So this makes a decent sized rose. This is what I left mine at. It was about 4 inches on the biggest one, and it does make a nice full-sized rose. So you can go ahead and hit make. And if you need to move anything around on your mats, this is where you would do so. So again, you can resize to whatever size you want to. I cut everything out with 65-pound cardstock, and I usually use the medium cardstock setting for Cricut. That is truly the whole setup. The setup would be similar, obviously, in Silhouette Studio. You would just upload the file, change any sizing, duplicate, and send. So once you have everything cut, let's go ahead and get to assembly. So the first thing you're going to want to do is make sure you have everything paired together size-wise. So again, there are 3 sizes, 2 of each, and you're going to want to start with the smallest and work your way to the outside. So I'm starting with my middle piece, and I'm using a paintbrush. You can also use a dowel here, really anything that can be rounded, I guess you could say. And I'm doing the first petal very rounded in. This is going to be our center petal. Don't worry about if it rips or anything. I glued mine down and it was okay still, so please don't worry. If you're new at this, I'm not new at this and I still make mistakes. So I'm making it super round, and this is going to be our center petal for the rose. For the rest of those petals on this first set of petals, we're going to curl it still using the dowel or the paintbrush, but I'm not making it as tight of a curl as that first one. They're kind of just more curled together rather than like completely enclosed into a cylinder. So go ahead and you can round all of those petals on the first one, and the first and second layers are different, so you can't do these together. You will have to do them separate, and then going forward the rest will be, you could do them together. So just the first 2 layers, you will have to roll these and shape them separately. So once you have all of your petals shaped, you have your one major cone, and then you have all of these slightly rounded petals, you are going to want to connect them. Now I'm going to be using hot glue today. You can use a craft glue. I just tend to use hot glue mostly for my flowers. So I am placing that super duper rolled one into the center, and then I'm going to take 2 petals that are opposite of each other, and I'm going to enclose it into that. So I'm taking the one that's directly next to it on the right and the one that's directly across from it, and I am going to attach those. And the way I'm attaching the petals is I'm actually doing them opposite. So meaning that the right side of one petal is on the top, and then the other side is on top on the other petal. And I will show you that closer up. The hardest part about all of this is trying to keep it as flat as possible, but here it is close up, and you want to have that center petal so you can see it, but it doesn't have to be flush with the rest of them like a real rose. Now we're going to do the same kind of overlapping for the next 2 petals. So again, I'm doing kind of opposite sides where one side is on top of the other one. So it's overlapping continuously in a circle rather than you can like one petal has both sides covered up. I really hope that that makes sense. But there's our first little rose bud. So now we're going to build our second layer onto that. So for the second layer, again, I'm using the paintbrush or dowel, whatever you want to say, and I'm rolling one side completely like we did before. And then on kind of like a diagonal angle, I'm rolling outwards. So that's going to be what is going to be on the outside, and the rolled in part is going to be the inside of the flower. But again, I'm doing one side where it's nice and curved, and then the top that is kind of on a diagonal rolled out. And you're going to do this same style all the way around the rose. So this is only for the second layer. Again, for the next 4 layers, we're going to be doing pretty much the same style, but not the same style as this one. The same style for those 4, but honestly, at the end of the day, it's your flower, and I'm just giving you somewhat of a technique to do it. And if you like to build your flower in a different way, by all means do it. I feel like a lot of these rose templates kind of are the same generally in the way the assembly is. So do with it what you wish. But this is how I am assembling my template. So I'm rolling all of those petals out, so it kind of has like a wave to it where one side's curled in and the top is not. And so we have this little wave, and I guess to me it just looks like a rosebud. So that's what we're going for. Just want to make sure it's nice and curled. And so now we're going to attach this onto our bud. And so we're going to do our second layer. So you're going to put glue right in the center. And again, try to keep these as centered as possible. I'm not saying mine are perfect by any means. So you also want to, as you are building your rose, be overlapping petals. So if you can see where my 2 petals meet in my bud are going to be covered up by a petal in the next row. So you do want to kind of have overlapping here where you don't want all your petals to be exactly lined up. You want them to be slightly shifted and catty-cornered. I feel like a paper rose is probably the most difficult of all the paper flowers to make. So if you've ever made any of my other flowers, I just feel like this one is probably the most complicated, but really once you get the hang of it, it's not as complicated as you think. I hope that helps. So I put a little bit of glue on the side that's curled inwards. So you'll see it again here. It's only on that left side. And if you curled it on the right side, no big deal. Your flower will just go in the opposite way. And I am gluing that down, but leaving the edge that's curled outwards not glued down. And I'm going to work my way all the way around my petals. And then I am going to tuck in that last petal into the first petal that we glued. And on this row, it's pretty easy to do. As we go further, you don't really have to do it as much because the flower will begin to open. But for this one's not that difficult to do because we did leave that one side open. So you are going to tuck that last petal that's sticking out into the petal that's first glued down. So we're kind of making like a windmill, like a turbine of some sort, fan. I don't know what you want to call it. But, and you're going to tuck that in as you glue it. So this is what your bud, the second row, should look like, where it's kind of folded out. And now we are going to go ahead and start adding on our third layer. So let's go ahead and shape those petals. So for this one, you can definitely do these together. So I just line them up and I'm curling. It's kind of on a diagonal out. So you're making like almost like a triangle. I hope that makes sense with your petals. And I'm using my bone tool here, but you can definitely still use your dowel, especially if you want really, really curled petals. So I am giving them a nice little curl, and then you can go back with your fingers and actually shape them a little bit more. Just be careful not to bend them too much. I did accidentally like fold one, and I did not want that. So you want to be bending them and keeping them still kind of rounded. So see, I'm grabbing my paintbrush here. You want it to be rounded, but also not bent, not folded. We're not making a card. We want them still to look like petals. So I am shaping all of my petals, and again, I'm going back through with my dowel or paintbrush, and now once your petals are shaped and rounded, we can kind of crease them before we start applying them on. So see, I'm kind of using my nail. You can use your finger. I almost wish my nails weren't so long when I'm making these, but now we have our next 2 rows shaped, and we're going to do it just like that, where they're kind of overlapping, just like I mentioned before. And we are going to glue these on, and we're going to put a little bit of glue right towards the bottom, but we're not going to glue all the way up, right? Because we don't want our petals to be stuck to each other. We want them just to kind of be glued and then still fold out like a real flower. So again, do your best to keep this as flat and as centered as possible, and place them in, and you're going to try to cover up that overlap. Okay, and so I'm grabbing my hot glue gun, and I'm going to put just a little bit of hot glue. I wish one day, I hope I master getting rid of glue gun strings, because I have to say those are the bane of my existence. But I do my best, right? So I am going to put a little bit of glue right towards the bottom. Make sure you're letting this dry, because if you don't, it starts to separate a little bit off of the flower, and then you can see like the webbing of the glue, and it just doesn't look as pretty. So just take your time with this and go around and let it dry, and just fold up all the flowers. And again, if it has overlap, try to tuck it into the flower next to it so that there's not one petal where both sides are overlapped. You want them to only really be overlapped on one side. Is it the end of the world if it's overlapped on 2 sides? No, not at all. So, do what you can, but if you cannot overlap on both sides, then let's try not to. And here I am trying to get rid of my strings of hot glue, but I'm going to finish this layer, and then we're going to do the same thing on the next layer. And so here is our first 4 layers done, and now we're going to do basically the same thing for the next 2 layers. So again, the first thing that I did, and I did these together, is I shaped my petals, and I am doing them towards the outside again, kind of on a diagonal, and I'm making sort of like a triangle type point. And I kind of like these super rounded, but you don't have to do them as rounded as I did. And you can use your dowel and go back through and shape with your fingers a little bit. And then we're going to just kind of squeeze them in with your nail to shape those petals a little bit. Remember, try not to fold the petals, because that's what happened here. I accidentally squeezed a little too much. So once you have them all shaped, it's going to be the same thing where we go around and we use a little bit of glue right towards the middle of the petal at the edge towards the center, and we glue them into the petal. And you're trying to overlap the space of the petals before it so that the flower is nice and full, and you don't have any huge gaps of petals. Of course, flowers are all different, and so they don't have to be perfect. And you will learn with each one that you make. So don't give up if yours doesn't look the same. And my other thing that I want to say is, you see where my thumb is on my left hand? It's right on the center of the rosebud. Just be careful that you're not smushing down that center too much when you're doing this. You can always fix it with your fingers. It's not the end of the world, but just keep that in mind to not put too much pressure on it. And so as you work your way around, you'll do your last row in the exact same way. And what's nice about the last row is it really doesn't need too much glue on those petals. You can kind of either leave it, you don't have to glue it. I just glued it ever so slightly down towards the center. So take your time with that. You can leave it the way it is and just have it kind of flopping off, almost like the petals are ready to fall. Or you can do what I'm doing and glue them in ever so slightly right in the center of the petal. And I hope one day I can master the no strings technique with my hot glue gun. So as you work your way around, that is how you finish up your flower. And once you have your flower done, we can start making the stem and the leaves. So the first thing we're going to do is our calyx, and we are just going to take our bone tool or your dowel and just shape those outwards. Nothing too fancy here for that one. I did not put a hole in this one. Sometimes in my other flowers I put holes, but this one I did not. I'm just going to use a pair of tweezers and stick a hole in the middle, and then grab my floral wire. I am using an 18 gauge for this one. I am threading it through, and then what I have found is if you put a little loop at the top of your floral wire and then bend it over so it kind of like hooks on, you can glue this down to your calyx and then glue it onto your flower, and it makes a really solid base. So this has been the best way to attach a calyx and a stem to your flowers. And then obviously depending on the weight of the flower will depend on the weight of the floral wire. And what I've learned in the past month is that floral wire gets thinner as the number goes up. So the thicker the floral wire, the lower the number. So again, this is the 18 gauge that I'm using, and it worked really well with this flower, which I made out of 65-pound cardstock. So here I have my glue on, and I'm just going to pop this right on to the calyx. And now for the leaves, it's going to be 100% up to you. I cut my floral wire because my stem was really long, and I made a separate stem for my leaves, but you can definitely just put your leaves right on to the stem that you have. So it's up to you on how you want to do it. So if you did cut it into two pieces, you can use some floral tape. And I did the floral tape before I did the leaves. I feel like it worked just fine doing it that way. And you're just gonna wanna pull this really tight. I really do hate floral tape, and I'm still getting used to it, but I think I did a really decent job on this one. I'm getting better at it with each flower. So you're just gonna wrap it up so that those are nice and tight together and almost look like one solid stem. And I feel like just doing it before you start adding on your leaves makes it a little bit easier. That way you're not trying to work around the leaf while trying to do the floral tape. So go ahead and tape those together, and then we can start on our leaves. So for my leaves, what I did was grabbed my bone tool, and I decided to add on some details with the bone tool. Again, this is optional. You can also do this with makeup or with alcohol inks, or you can just leave them the way they are. But I am adding on some details with my leaves with my bone tool. You can also use your scoring stylus from your Cricut. And then I am shaping them with my fingers. So don't need any special fancy tools here, just giving them a little bit of a curl. And I am going to do that with all of the leaves to give them some shape and some character. And once you have them all ready to go, we can start attaching on our leaves. And I worked from the smallest to the biggest. So the smallest are on the outside of our stem, working down to the biggest that are closer to the middle of the stem. So totally up to you how you put them on though. I put a little bit of hot glue on the little end and then just put it on the stem and wrapped it around. And that is how I attached all of the leaves going all the way down. So I hope that made sense on how to do it. And I don't think you need to see all of the leaves glued on, but you can do these however you want. You can add on more. You can put some leaves onto the stem with a rose. Totally up to you how you place these. And here is our final rose with our leaves on it. And I hope you enjoyed making this as much as I did. I'm really proud of this flower, and I really enjoyed making it, designing it, testing it out. I really love it. Thank you for joining me as we made the June flower, the rose. I want to remind you, you can find all of the other flowers for the year linked down below. They all have free SVG files along with them. And I also have a few more flowers over on my blog, and I will link to that as well, where you can find all of my free paper flower templates. If you learned something and you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. It helps me so much. Subscribe to my channel for new crafty videos, and share this with one of your friends who needs a paper rose template. I will see you soon in my craft room, and stay crafty.